apparently the director of Twisters is in a little bit of hot water because he was saying that he doesn't think that they need to push a climate change agenda in their movie, which even if you are for pushing some type of message in whatever movie, this probably isn't the best one to choose to do that in because it just makes things seem a little bit ridiculous and hyperbolic if you're going to use Twisters as an example of what can happen if people, well, essentially just don't give more money to the government. But let's dive into this article from the Hollywood Reporter that's talking about it. So the headline, Twisters director on not mentioning climate change, movies shouldn't preach a message. Director Lee Isaac Chung on why his meteorological disaster movie doesn't reference global warming. The storm-chasing sequel Twisters is racking up positive reviews, currently at 84% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, and continues a much-needed summer of Glen Powell. The film chronicles an unprecedented outbreak of violent storms that tear through the American heartland and has characters spouting plenty of meteorological jargon. But the one thing Twisters doesn't have, a reference to climate change. Now, I think a lot of us are probably tired at this point of people insisting that each movie has to have some type of message in it. And while I'm saying some movies can have a message or you can have more of a greater purpose, there's other movies, like when it comes to a movie about Twisters like this, it should just be a fun popcorn movie because I think we still need a lot of those. Or even if there are messages in movies, I think they should also be done subtly. Not everything has to be completely in your face, but some people would disagree with that. This is rather surprising. The possible impact of climate change on tornadoes is complicated and still being figured out, but scientists seem to agree tornado patterns are changing, with more tornadoes happening on the same day and more tornadoes happening outside of Tornado Alley, even if the number of tornadoes overall is unchanged. So, okay, they're just being different. It's not necessarily more or less. It's the same, but they're just done in a different manner. Okay, fair enough. And in any case, the American Red Cross recently told ABC News that the climate crisis is forcing the American Red Cross to respond to nearly twice as many large disasters as we did a decade ago. Keep in mind, though, the way they actually measure the size of a disaster is usually in monetary figures, and things are just more expensive now. Cities are bigger now than they were a decade ago. So yes, there will be more large-scale disasters just for that simple fact. Simply have Daisy Edgar-Jones frantically looking at some Doppler radar and mutter an actual study statistic like, the bulletin of the American Meteorological Society projected a 6.6% nationwide increase in the frequency of supercell thunderstorms by the end of the century because of global warming, but nothing like this. It says here that such a line would add more heft to it and make it seem like, oh, but seriously though, this could really happen. And no, it can't really happen, at least not the way they're portrayed in movies. It's just kind of a fun distraction, but apparently some people don't like that. And they're saying like, oh, it's just a throwaway line. What's the big deal? It's like, okay, well, just imagine for a second in Black Panther when Martin Freeman's character wakes up in Wakanda and he asks like, well, why is this country so technologically advanced? And they say, it's like, oh, it's because we're good about securing our borders and making sure not anyone can just wander into our country. It's like, okay, that's just a throwaway line too, but a lot of people would be seeing that and be like, oh, it's kind of putting me out of it. It's like, I don't want to be reminded of right-wing talking points or anything like that while watching a summer blockbuster movie. Yeah, exactly. It's stupid when people are just trying to shoehorn messages into movie regardless of whether you agree with that message or not. Because me personally, when I'm watching a movie, I don't want to be reminded of the news. I want to have some type of distraction. If it's a movie I'm going into where I expect a message, then fine, I'm accepting that on the way into it. But if I'm just trying to watch a movie about a bunch of tornadoes destroying stuff, I don't want to be reminded of the news. But some people seem to disagree with me on that one, but not the director of Twisters, because this is what he had to say. I just wanted to make sure that with the movie, we don't ever feel like it is putting forward any message, Chung told CNN. I just don't feel like films are meant to be message oriented. And yeah, I agree for the most part, movies don't need to be message oriented. Like, you can have some type of message in your movie if you really want to, but you don't need to make it so overt like what the proposed line in this article were, because then that just takes people out of the movie, because at that point, the movie isn't just playing out in front of you, it's stopping the movie so it can preach to you, and I don't think people like being preached to. There is a scene where a local farmer, played by Mara Tierney, says that storms and floods are becoming more frequent, but she doesn't mention climate change. Okay, yeah, if someone just offhandedly says, like, it seems like these storms are becoming more frequent, you can include a line like that, but don't say these storms are becoming more frequent because of the statistic that says climate change. It's like, okay, that's just bad writing there. And maybe I could just chalk it up to the writer of this article isn't a screenwriter. So maybe you just need to workshop that line a little bit, but maybe it might be able to work or something like that. This, I think, is fine. Just saying, like, it seems like the storms are becoming more frequent because that doesn't seem to be enough to take people out of the movie. And I'm kind of curious how this will actually play out, because apparently a lot of activists are upset because this isn't pushing their agenda. But by all accounts, it looks like the opening weekend for Twisters is supposed to be pretty good. They're projecting around $100 million globally during its opening weekend, with around 50 million or so projected from North America. So not a bad start, but the budget for this movie is around the $200 million range. And even though this is actually getting pretty good reception amongst critics, I think it's around like the 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. So around 75% on Rotten Tomatoes, I'll just say. So not too bad, all things considered. But it's just a matter of whether audiences will come out to see it, because we've seen this last year that even good movies, people don't come out to see. And I'm talking ones that critics and audiences like. A lot of people are just figuring like, well, theaters are expensive, I'll just wait for it to come out on streaming. Not to mention the week after this is premiering, then you've got Deadpool and Wolverine. So maybe a lot of people are just going to wait and see Deadpool and Wolverine. I know the audience, there's some overlap, but this isn't necessarily like a comic book movie. So there's a little bit of a different market for this, but it's still a summer blockbuster action movie. So there's a lot of that audience overlap. So maybe Deadpool and Wolverine will cannibalize a lot of that and kind of take some of the wind out of their sails. This, I think, is just kind of being released at a bad time. If it was released a few weeks ago, then it probably would have fared a lot better, because the movie's budget is around $200 million. So with that, it probably needs to make around maybe even $700 million in order for the studio to consider it a success and for it to make money. So with that kind of budget, it's doubtful, even with a good start like this. But one thing is for sure, I think it will be doing better if it's not trying to push a message. And we've seen time and time again, movies that should have done well end up just tanking at the box office because they were just trying to shoehorn in some type of political agenda, even if it was subtle. A lot of people were put off by that in recent years. So I think what the director is doing with this is probably the smart move, and that should just be the default position for all movies. If it's a message-oriented movie, fine, have your message. If it's not, don't include that in there. Or if you are going to include something, just make it subtle and don't make the audience feel like they're just being lectured to, because that's just bad movie making and bad storytelling. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Are you interested in seeing Twisters? Are you more or less interested in it after hearing this type of news? Comment below and let me know. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share the video with your friends, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.